Hello, I'm the Grandmaster Iván Salgado. In this video, I will show you how to play the middle game in the Spanish Chigorin. It appears after the moves e4, e5, knight f3, Nc6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, castle, c3, d6, h3. Here we are. Black has several options to fight against the move d4. The most popular move in the last 200 years at least is the move knight a5. Okay, black wants to take the bishop pair, and after bishop c2, black plays c5, trying to gain some extra control on the d4 square. White normally plays d4 here, and here starts everything. Normally, black's move is queen c7, but there is another move that is knight d7. This move we will check it at the end of the video because it's completely different. I will show you why. When black plays queen c7, the idea is to get control of the e5 square. It's just to make it very strong. But when black plays knight d7, normally the idea is to take on d4, c takes d4, for example in the variation knight bd2, e takes d4, c takes d4, knight c6. And now we are playing some kind of Benoni after d5, knight c5. Because of that, I say that it's completely different. First, we will focus our energies on queen c7 and how black tries to make e5 square very strong. And then we will check knight d7. So, knight bd2, here this is the main line, and now black has many options. Let's go one by one. At the beginning, like in 150 years ago, people decided that knight c6 was like normal move, with the idea that white might play d5 or d takes c5. Simply, black wants to force the situation. The point is that white cannot keep the tension with knight f1 because after c takes d4, knight d4, knight takes d4, e takes d4, after queen d4, the bishop on c2 is hanging, and the position is more or less balanced. Actually, white should play something like knight g3. So, white now should make a decision to play d5 or to take on c5. Now we will check d takes c5. I want to tell you that in this video we will be not so worried about the concrete moves. We will check all the middle game ideas. My idea here is, if I can show you all the typical middle game ideas in the Chigorin, I will be very happy with this video. Actually, the selection I made is just for that. Not about concrete moves, but about different pawn structures, different middle game ideas. So I think that after this video and some concrete knowledge in the opening, you will be ready to play with white and with black. So first, we will check the strategy after knight c6, d takes c5. We can call it Fischer's strategy. He loves to play like this many years ago. What's the point? After d takes c5, now the strategy is very simple. White should try to take under control the d5 square, and black should try to avoid it. White normally will try some maneuvers like knight h2, knight g4, sometimes even bishop g5. This is white's plan. Black idea normally is try to push the pawn to c4, creating some space for the bishop on e7 to go to c5, and of course other pieces will try to take control of d5, like bishop e6, one rook to d8, something like this. But we will check the games, because like this will be much more clear. Of course, knight f1 is very normal. Now we see all these typical ideas. Knight e3 with the idea knight h2. And black has two main options. One is to play with bishop e6 and develop, and the other is first to attack the queen with rook d8, queen e2, and now bishop e6 will go to our main lines. But many years ago against Fischer, some players decided to play knight h5. The idea is very clear. After knight e3, black wants to jump with knight f4, and after queen f1, simply bishop e6, following c4 at some point, bishop c5, knight e3, and black will have huge advantage. So this is a typical idea. But let's have a look to Fischer games. First, I want to show you one idea that I found. I was really surprised when I was checking this position with the computer, and suddenly computer says g4, like very good move. Maybe you will not find these ideas in the middle game so often, but it's very interesting to know that this kind of moves can exist. For example, after g4, knight f4, takes, and now e5, with the idea to play queen e4 and take the pawn on f4. And white is much better. It's not very intuitive idea, but it's working somehow. But okay, this is my idea. Let's check Fischer. So once he was playing g3, just he wants to play knight e3. Of course, bishop h3 is not so good because of knight g5, bishop f1, queen h5, bishop g5, bishop g5, f6, rook f1, f takes, queen takes. And white is slightly better. At some point, maybe this bishop is entering d1, g4, and making use of the weak squares on e6. Who knows? This move g3 is very typical in this kind of positions, and we should always pay attention to tactics with knight g5 after bishop h3. So here, black decided simply to protect with g6. And now Fischer makes a very logical move, it's h4. The pawn is not hanging, and at some point, white can jump with knight to g5 and take with h pawn if black wants to give the bishop. The game followed bishop e6, very normal move, and knight e3. Black decided to play f6. I'm not sure if it's the best, but actually, positional the knight e5 is coming, and it's really difficult to find a move for black already after 18 moves, and actually looks like black did nothing wrong, but sometimes it happens. f6, and now Fischer decided to play knight d5, which is a very interesting idea. The point is that after bishop d5, it takes d5, rook d5, now strong move a4, and after rook b8, take on b5, and c4. And then white is taking on b5 because b takes c4, queen c4, white is winning the rook, and white is much better. So knight d5, we can say that it was a very good move. And black decided to play queen b7, and now we have one of the, this is very typical of Fischer. No everyone will play like this, but he liked it. He took on e7. I'm not sure if this is the best move. Probably I would like something like knight h2 first, because I highly doubt that black can take on d5, because too many weak squares, and only there should be some tactical possibility here. a4, it's a positional move that is quite good. And another move is a computer move that actually is quite difficult to play, but makes some sense. That is to play g4, and after knight g7, h5. And we are making all the white squares weak. And look at our bishops. They are cutting the position. This is something I like very much. And actually, the position is extremely difficult for black. But Fischer, as he says, a bishop is even better than the best knight. So he normally did these kind of things. He took, and now knight h2. And we see how he starts the same route for the knight. Very logical. Black played knight g7, and knight g4, c4, and he played queen f3. He's threatening on f6 and he wants to play knight d3 and d5. Very easy plan. Black gave the other bishop, queen g4, knight e6, and now extremely logical game from Fischer, h5. His idea is if black plays g5, then he will have two possibilities in the future, to play with f4 or at some point to improve the bishop from d1, g4. But of course, first he will play bishop e3, then rook d1, will exchange some pieces, and will try to use the weaknesses in the future. Black played king h8 here, and Fischer, very calm, played king g2, g5, and now bishop e3. Here he gave some tactical possibilities. I'm not so sure I will give them. Maybe here was better something else, but it's good enough. Knight f4, and he played king h2. Simple developing, and knight d3, take, c takes d3, and rook d1. Very simple. Now he will try to place all the pieces, all the rooks on the d line, and put pressure on the d3 pawn. Black played rook d7, rook d2, knight a5, b3, void knight c4. All the moves extremely easy. Queen d6, rook a d1, rook e8, and now a little trick. Rook d3, queen d3, queen d7. And actually, Bisgier with black decided to resign this position with Fischer in 1963. Actually, this is a very clean game from Fischer. I like it very much. He's showing us all the ideas in this position. Of course, we'll have a look to some other games here, but actually this is a game that deserves to be remembered because all the ideas are extremely clear. Instead of g3, there is the possibility a4 first, rook b8, a takes b5, a takes b5, and g3 now. It's a bit similar, but with this pawns exchange. You know who was playing white here? Again, Fischer. The funny thing is that he played this game 3 years before the previous one. I showed you actually the best one before. So like this we will see what he learned from the previous game. After g3, black played g6, very similar, h4, bishop e6, and knight e3. It's very, very similar, almost the same game. So sometimes people say that, oh, Fischer was so talented. Yes, but so much, such a hard work behind him. He developed this system by himself. He knew it extremely well. So the game was knight e3, c4, and knight g5. Very easy idea. Bishop takes on g5, a takes g5, and knight a5. And once again, Fischer goes for knight g4, trying to get the other bishop. Bishop takes, queen g4, knight b3, bishop takes, c takes, and bishop e3. Yes, this is very, very similar. I'm sure that if you knew this game, the later one you would play almost the same than Fischer. So after bishop e3, the position is very good, but it's very nice to check it till the end. Rook a8, he decides to take and take the d-line, trying to play some rook d7 at some point. Black plays queen c6 and rook d5, attacking b5, e5, everything. Now black decides to play f5 to get some counterplay, but of course it's nothing special. Now after queen d1, the rook will enter on d7 at some point, and the queen is taking on b3. So two threats at the same time, we should always look for this kind of moves. Black played f4, and Fischer took, it takes, and queen b3. Just an intermediate move. Maybe some sharpest player will have played bishop c5, but I'm sure that Fischer was calm enough, and he thought that he will win the endgame without any problem. After queen c4, takes, b takes, bishop d4, f3, and now very interesting move actually, bishop e3. He doesn't want to give any kind of counterplay with knight f4, knight e2. Of course, every move is winning, but it's better to play the most accurate all the time. Black played h6 because he wants to put the knight into the game with knight f6. He took knight f6, rook d6, king f7, and some tactical trick. Rook f6, king takes, bishop d4, following h7, getting the rook, and white won. This game was Fischer against Elis Cases in Mar del Plata 1960. So actually this game is very good and very similar to the previous one. So here we could see quite clear White's plan in this variation. We should check some more games to understand better the position. Now let's get into bishop e6. Black tries to get control of the d5 square and is not going for moves like knight h5. Knight e3, the same. And now rook a8, the most normal move. Rook f8 is possible as well, but as you remember from a previous game, after rook a8, after a4, Black sometimes was losing a tempo with rook b8, so it's better to have immediately the rook on d8. Rook a8, queen e2, and now Black plays c4, the most correct strategical move in this position. As I said before, now bishop c5 is coming, and Black pieces are quite active. Now, there are a few games from Fischer again, and first we will start with knight f5. Knight f5, what's the problem? If White plays knight h2, as before, there is an extremely powerful tactical trick for Black. This is knight d4. Remember this kind of ideas, because you can win games very easily. C takes d4, e takes d4, and after knight f5, bishop f5, e takes, and bishop b4, following d3, and Black is almost winning this position. So with this bishop e6, rook a8, and c4 idea, we avoid the plan knight h2, knight g4, which was extremely annoying in the previous games. So this is not possible, and Fischer, once he played knight f5, and later he played knight g5. After knight f5, Black plays normal rook e8. He's not worried. After knight e7, he will take with the knight, and look, the d5 square now is extremely protected. No weakness for Black, and then he is ready to play something like knight d7 and knight c5 to get control of the weak d3 square. The position is more or less balanced. Fischer played bishop g5 here, and Black played perfectly with knight d7, bishop e7, knight e7, and knight g5. Again, same idea. Now he's trying to take the bishop, and now Black made a big mistake here, because Black had to take on f5 with the bishop, but somehow it was not so easy. Simply he's taking a pawn after bishop f5, it takes f5, h6, knight e4, and knight f5. And it's clear that White has some compensation on the light square. For example, after rook a d1, everything is in the center, d6 square is a bit weak, but it's not enough compensation, so Black had to play like this. In the game, this was in 1970, Black played h6, and this move I don't like at all, because the pawns become weak, and now White has some statistical advantage. Now we will see how Fischer plays excellent till he won the game. He took on e6, f takes e6, and now knight e3. Now White wants to exchange the rooks, maybe play b3 at some point, and after c takes b3, bishop b3, d6 will be quite weak, and later d5 pawn will be weak as well. In the game, Black played knight g6, and of course Fischer g3. No counterplay. This was very typical from Fischer. Knight f6, and rook d1. He's taking the line. Take, take, rook d8, and he's not worried at all. He will exchange everything. Take, take, and now b3. Now he wants to make use of the weakness on e6. c takes, and he took with the bishop. Maybe taking with the pawn was possible as well, but with the bishop is good. Knight f8, and now c4. I like this move because now c3 was the only weakness and we exchanged it. Now black played queen d7. Queen d7, and this seems to be a mistake. It was a bit more accurate to play queen b6 here to protect b5 and e6 at the same time, but as the queen is more active as well, because on d7 I don't like it so much. And after c takes b5, a takes b5, computer says that white is slightly better, and probably this is true. Of course, it will not be easy to win this game, but slowly trying to make use of these weaknesses, I think that black will have a hard time. So c4, black played queen d7, and now Fischer, for now he played queen c2 to protect e4. Maybe c5 is coming, maybe c takes b5 is coming with queen c5. He has several ideas. Black played queen b7, he took, and knight g4. He exchanges the knight, but black wants to go to d7. Knight takes, h takes, maybe was the best for black, but as well the position is quite passive, although maybe it's close to equal, but black still should suffer. Knight d7, and he played queen d3. Now, look, he attacks the b5 pawn, and he wants to enter on d6. So queen c6 was a good move, and now queen e3. Now maybe he wants to enter on a7, who knows. And king f7. And now comes something that made Fischer quite good. If there was a tactical possibility in the position, he would always see it. And now it's clear that black blundered knight e5, queen f4, and after queen e5, position is completely winning. The advantage was not so big, but was quite annoying, and black O'Kelly in this game was not able to defend the position. And this is again a good example for white. But everything is not as good as it looks, because black has several ideas. As we saw in this position after knight g5, black could have taken on f5 with some balanced position. But what's more important too is that Fischer first he tried knight g5 in this position, and actually knight g5 is computer move, but then he didn't play it again, and actually it's very interesting to understand why. After knight g5, his Russian opponent Holmov played h6. He was saying, okay, take my bishop. After knight e6, f takes e6, I will have control of the d5 square, of the f5 square, and your knight on e3 has nothing to do. And now you should think how to play. And actually, computer says some advantage for white, but I think Fischer understood it very well that the position can be dangerous only for white. Here, computer idea is to play b3, trying to destroy the pawn structure as we saw before. But I'm sure that Fischer was worried about the move bishop c5, and after b takes c4, he was worried about b4. It's a fantastic strategical idea. Look, the bishop on c2 is doing nothing, the bishop on c1 is doing nothing special, but black, everything is playing. The rook on the d line is playing, the rook on the f line is playing, the bishop is playing, the knight is ready to jump at some point. It's fantastic. For example, c takes b4, white can play bishop, black can play bishop b4, then the knight will jump to d4, and black position is extremely difficult. Actually, after bishop c5, computer gives some very strange moves like rook f1, but actually black can do the same after bishop a7, and b takes c4, b4, and black has extremely good compensation. Actually, I would prefer to play with black, this position. So this idea is something that should be remembered. I think that Fischer was worried about this because he decided to play b4 in his game. But after b4, now comes one idea that we checked in the previous line. And this idea is knight d4. This is very, very good because now white should take on d4, and after he takes d4, d3 idea will come with better position for black. Actually, Fischer could not really fight in this game. After a3, black played d3, takes, rook takes, knight g4, and now the position is very good, but it's quite interesting to see how the Russian Grandmaster played. Now he played king h7, very solid. He's not bored, he just takes his time. e5, just trying to get some square for the queen, and he took on g4. Knight e5 was good as well, but sometimes it's interesting to make the position as simple as possible. And taking on g4, you are sure that there will not be some kind of knight fork in the wrong moment. So he took queen e4, g6, queen g4, and rook f5. He's improving all his pieces. White play queen e2, and now queen d7, bishop e3, and queen d5, exchanging queens. We see how easy Holmov does the job. He takes, f4, and now very easy move, and I like it very much. g5. He wants to define the pawn structure after g3, g takes, and now look, the king will be ready to enter into the game. Gameful rook f8, king g2, king g6, rook g1, rook d3, king f3, and king f5. Everything very logical. Rook g7, bishop d8, and rook b7. Looks like black has some compensation, but still the white has some compensation, but still black is better. Rook g8 he played with the idea to play some bishop h4, rook g3 maybe, and now Fischer made the final mistake. He could still fight with rook f7, king g6, and coming back to b7, but this is quite difficult to play like this in a practical game. Actually, he decided to pin with rook b8, and Holmov simply played rook g7, improving a bit his pieces, a4, and simply h5, trying to play h4 and rook g3. Everything very logical. I like it very much. Fischer decided to take on b5, but now after bishop g4, rook g3 is coming. He played king e2, rook g2, check, king f1, rook h2 with the idea rook h1, king g1. He played rook e2 attacking the bishop, bishop b6, c3 is coming, king f1, rook h2, and here Fischer resigned. So I think that with all these games we saw how white should play and how black should play. I believe this position after d takes c5 is more or less balanced from the theoretical point of view, and depends who understands the middle games better to know who will win the game or who will get some advantage. Now we should check, instead of knight c6, how to play after d5. So here we are with the plan with d5. Now black's idea in this position is to play with knight d8. Knight a5 doesn't make so much sense. And now, okay, we lost some tempo with the knight, but black should have some idea here, right? Black's idea was found by the great Akiva Rubinstein more than 100 years ago. The plan is very simple. He will try to keep the queenside together. I mean, nothing terrible should happen there. And he will simply play knight d8, g6, knight g7, f6, knight f7, and in the right moment to play f5. This was the whole conception. Actually, later there were some grandmasters like Michael Marin or René Stern from Germany who were playing this. And actually, I think I understood this position quite well because I was lucky to play this grandmaster from Germany, René Stern, like few weeks ago, and I understood that this system for black is quite interesting, and white should know exactly what to do. If not, everything can go completely wrong. So let's have a look how white should make use of the space advantage because of the d5 pawn. Here, normal move is to play a4, but there are other possibilities. Let's start with knight f4. Just this normal plan. Knight d8, a4, and now as I said, black should keep the position together on the queen side, and okay, rook b8. He doesn't care about the line so much. The important thing is to keep things calm there. And 8 takes b5. If black plays b4, black would play g6. And now, for example, bishop h6 is the normal move. This is one of the typical moves in this variation. Another possibility is to take on b5, take, and take on c5. But actually, this pawn structure, d takes c5, bishop h6, is not so clear. Because, okay, the d pawn is passed, but it's not so clear what we are going to do. And for example, here, I don't know if it's the best, but I like there is some interesting possibility that is to play c4, takes, and give this change. And then black will try to play knight d6, before f6 to avoid knight d5, knight b7, knight c5, with some interesting compensation. Probably white is better, I just want to show you the idea. So here he played bishop h6, and okay, knight g7, 8 takes b5, and now I think that white didn't make the best use in the position. Normally it's good to get this pawn structure, b takes, d takes, and now c4. This move is very important to avoid this c4 I was trying to show you before. Here black should play b4, and now white plays knight d2, and the idea is easy. Try to attack the weaknesses. Maybe the knight will go to b3, white will try to get some control of the A line, knight going to e1 and d3, and bishop e3. But as I said, it's very important to know what to do with white, if not we can get lost into the variation. Here with white was the Grandmaster Cotrones, actually a big expert in chess openings, and he played knight h2, a move that I think is not with the position. Black played f6, the plan I said to you before, and he now decided to play f4. I think he didn't choose the right place where to play. If white makes normal moves like knight e3, after knight f7, bishop e3, black would take on b4, take, and bishop d7. And f5 is coming in any moment with very difficult position in practical game for white. Normally computer likes white all the time, but then after the right moves from black, things are not so easy. But Cotrones played with f4, and now it's strange why Michael Marin didn't play knight f7, bishop g7, king g7, because there is something very important. This bishop that looks so bad is not bad at all, because there is very important maneuver to play bishop d8 and bishop b6, and the bishop becomes extremely active. This you should remember. For example, f5, take, bishop d7. At some point this idea, and black is better. It's very strange that Marin didn't play like this. He took on f4, takes, knight f7, knight f3, he established the knight on e5, knight e2, bishop d7, and some balanced position. Nothing dramatic is happening. Cotrones won this game at the end, but it was not because of the opening. So here we can see some of black and white ideas. It's possible to take on b5 as well, and g4. This is another plan. Thomas decided to play with Rubinstein like this in 1925, and now we will see how Rubinstein played. He played g6, this common move, knight g3, and knight g7, protecting the king side. Normally, it's well known, if you have a knight next to the king, it's very difficult to get mated. Imagine you have two, if you have two around. The situation is really safe. White played king h1, trying to give some mate, but Rubinstein is playing his plan. Rook g1, knight f7, queen f1, and bishop d7. Actually, this line, you will see it very often. Black is trying to do this all the time. Bishop e3, and now it's time to change things on the line. Rook a8, queen g2, take, queen b7, and then rook a8. Very easy plan for black. Queen f1, and now he tries to take the line. Knight d2, queen a8, take. And I think black is slightly better already. Although computer says that the position is completely equal, I prefer to play with black here because there are some f5 possibilities, some h5 possibilities. And Rubinstein eventually eventually won this game with black. So here again we see some ideas. Instead of knight f1, we can play b3. And again, now we will take again from my opponent René's turn. g6, knight f1, and now he has a new way to play the variation. That is to play knight h5. And actually, I like it very much because it's the same idea like knight e8, but we avoid knight g3 possibility, and maybe at some point we can jump to f4. Simply, we have more ideas. But now we will have how similar it is to Rubinstein games. a4, rook b8, keeping everything close, takes, knight g3, and now taking on g3, another pawn structure, although knight g7 is possible as well, nothing terrible is gonna happen. Take, and f6, knight goes to f7, bishop e3, bishop d7, rook a6, knight f7. Very typical, right? Queen a1, and now queen c8, very good move, trying to play rook e8 and fight for the line. g4, rook a8, take, queen b2, queen b7, rook a1, rook a8, rook a2, trying to get the line with queen a1, bishop d8, queen a1, takes, bishop b6, king h2, and the position is again balanced, but somehow black managed to win. But simply black has no problems at all, and I like the position. So now let's have a look. Instead of b3, we'll check a4, rook b8, and here we will enter into my preparation for the game against the Stern. First, I had a look to some positions with a takes b5 to understand that this is not the way to handle the position. But we should check it first. A takes b5, takes, and now c4. We just try to keep the d5 pawn quite defended, and like this we are not so much worried about the 5. b4, knight f1, and knight e8. Same moves. And now white didn't play in the best way because he played g4. It was better to play knight h2 with the idea to play f4 immediately. We should always look for these ideas before a knight gets to e5. For example, f6, f4, takes, bishop takes, knight f7, knight e3, g6, knight g4, and we have control of the e5 square, and probably the position is slightly better for white. Although after knight g7 is not so easy to break. But g4 is a move I don't like so much, because after g6 we will not be able to develop our initiative. Bishop h6, knight g7, knight e3, f6. Once again the same moves. King g2, knight f7. Now white was forced to give the bishop, knight d2, and now it's very interesting to follow the game. Rubinstein played rook h8, knight f1, and now h5, opening the position. This is a very typical idea as well. Knight g3, takes, and he decided to play with knight g5. Another possibility would be to play bishop f8 with the same ideas. Like, you remember before we were playing bishop e7, bishop d8, bishop b6. Now we play bishop f8 with the idea king g8, bishop h6, bishop f4, and then knight g5 with very good position. This was another possibility. But after h8, he decided to play knight g5 and to jump immediately with knight h3, knight f4. Bishop a4, knight h3, bishop c6, knight f4, king f3, king rook b6. Maybe he wants to give this chance at some point, who knows. Rook h1, take, rook a6. He decided to change everything there, but white decided to try some mate, black played king g8. And the position was very interesting. It was between Bogolyubov and Rubinstein. They had a match, something like a match in this kind of position. They played several games. And at the end was draw, but anything could have happened, although I prefer black because of the pair of bishops and the position has some more potential. So we saw that this kind of idea with g4 is not working so well. Now possibilities to play c4 immediately without opening the line. And after b4, I check some games. One possibility is to play again for the g4 ideas, knight d8, g4, g6, rook g1, f6, knight f1, knight f7, knight e3, king h8. Interesting, this time he's not playing with knight g7. Why? We will see it now. I really like how Rubinstein plays here. King h8, b3, and now rook g8, bishop b2, and bishop f8. The plan he missed in the other game, he's playing now. h4 and queen e7, taking control of the g5 square, rook g2 and bishop h6. It's amazing. So little space for black, but he finds a square for every single piece. Queen e2, bishop f4, king h1, and now queen f8. Very slow but very precise. King d1, queen h6, bishop c1, and bishop d7. He's developing every single piece. King f1, actually it's very hard to find a plan. Knight g7, the queen is not trapped. We always after g5 we have some queen h5. We don't have to be worried a lot. Queen d3, rook f8, bishop d1, and now it's a pity because Rubinstein played so well here. It's a pity that here he didn't realize that he can play with f5. It's a pity. The point is that after g5, queen h5, knight e5 is not working because of knight e5. And apparently white cannot make use of this pin, and black is ready to take on e4, bishop h3, and enter with every single piece. The position is almost winning for black. He played knight d8 here, he came back, they were turning around. It was Bogolyubov Rubinstein again, and he didn't manage to win with black. But he got to great position and he shows fantastic ideas. Other possibilities to play b3 here, knight d8 and g4. We see how Bogolyubov, he was playing all the time g4. Actually, he was very interesting chess player. He was saying, okay, if I'm white, I win because I'm white. If I'm black, I win because I'm Bogolyubov. And so he was kind of very positive guy, very optimistic. And this kind of moves were very typical. And here he played g6, his idea. According to the computer, it was better to play immediately h5 with the idea knight h2, take, and bishop g5. The same idea, but without losing so many tempi with bishop f4, f8, bishop h6. So this idea should be remembered. g6, king h1, and now he made mistake. He had to play king g7 and h5, rook h8, the same similar idea. But he played knight g7, and now the problem is that after rook g1, h4, h5 is coming very fast. So black decided that it was time to play h5 himself, but now we will see knight f1 takes, f6, knight e3, knight f7, and this is the problem. Now, once the h pawns are exchanged, the g6 pawn is quite weak, and black has some difficulties with him. He had to play knight h8, and now here Bogolyubov went completely wrong. He just had to give a piece with knight f5. This is very common in Chigorin. The point is that after knight g takes, the king is trapped, queen h5 is coming, and soon will be mated. For example, if king f7 will play bishop h6, rook g8, something protecting, and we enter with every single piece. We take, queen h5, we take, rook g1, and mate. So actually it's very strange that he didn't see it. He plays some f4, take, and knight f5. But now he already gave a pawn, and after taking, and g5, the position was not so clear, and eventually it was a draw again. So these three games from Rubinstein and Bogoljub were quite interesting to show some ideas, and they were really useful for me to understand what shall I look for and what I should not do. And here I understood that it was good to play b4. I should keep the tension on the queen side. I should not close it, because if not, black plan to play with knight e8, f6 is very easy. I should keep many possibilities to make it more difficult. And now here knight b7, it was played by my opponent. After bishop d7, here comes my idea, was to play b takes e5. I wanted to destroy the pawn structure. The point is that if he plays d takes e5, I take and c4. I show you this idea before. And after b4, bishop b2, and only thing is left is to activate this knight on d2, going to b3, trying to get control of the a line, and the position is extremely difficult for black. Have a look that black didn't have time to play knight d8, f6, knight d6, so he should defend the position like this, and all the harmony is lost. So this idea was very important, to take on c5 like this, but of course my opponent was really experienced in this kind of position, and he played knight b7 immediately. And here comes what in my opinion is the great point in the variation, that is to play a5. It was really hard for me to find this move, first because the computer is not giving it, and second because no one was playing like this. Actually, this is a novelty. But the idea is quite easy. Okay, first of all, the queen side is not completely closed, because at some point I might be able to play c4. And I can break everything. Second, I avoid black from playing with bishop d8, bishop b6, because my pawn on a5 is taking control of that square. Moreover, the pawn on a6 is a weakness, and you never know, for example, if the position is closed with c4. I checked many variations where sometimes one white queen was coming from a3 to b6 or to a7, and it was extremely hard to defend the pawn. One more thing that was very important is that if black plays c4, should be very careful in some kind of endgames, because I can take on c4 twice, give a piece, then try to take on a6, and my pawns start rolling. So actually I think it's a very complete move, a5. And black played bishop d7 in the game, and now knight f1. I didn't like to play with g4. Now I improve my pieces, and black should be careful where shall I go. If I go on the queen side, if I go on the king side, I keep all my possibilities open. Now my opponent played knight d8. It's possible to play knight d8 too, but I saw that my opponent normally likes to play these knight h5 ideas. So actually I was expecting something like that. But somehow he decided to play knight d8 first. Of course now he's not worried about b takes e5, because he will take with the queen, and it's not so clear what I'm going to do. And then black is planning to come back to b7, bishop d8, and try to take my pawn on a5. So first I played knight g3, developing, and now he made a small inaccuracy, because it's clear that he wants to get his system with knight d8, g6, f6, knight f7, but probably he had to go with knight d8 immediately, because he played g6 first, something that was a bit strange, but of course there were some possibilities with knight f5. Maybe he was worried about something like this. Who knows? I didn't think about it during the game, but probably it was quite interesting, because after bishop takes f5, it takes f5, then I will play g4, g5 at some point, and the position is quite annoying. So maybe he had some reason to play g6. And now here it's clear. Bishop h6 is the normal move. I understood it immediately, but after rook e8, then I thought, okay, maybe my opponent, he decides to play something like king h8, knight g8, f6, knight f7, and f5. And I thought, okay, maybe it's not so easy. And I thought, okay, why not to play bishop g5? And like this, I can make use of some tactical ideas in the position, And it's not so easy to play this f6 knight f7, so I thought, okay, maybe it's more practical move. My opponent played bishop c8. Actually, it was quite expected because he wants to play knight d8, f6, and knight f7. Probably it was time to come back with knight to b7, but it's very difficult to play like this. Once you have an idea, you just follow it. Bishop c8, and now here I thought for a long time till I understood that I found the best move, and it's queen d2. Now I'm looking for some tactical possibilities in this diagonal, and you will see that at the end it worked quite well. He played knight d8, he followed his plan, and now I was very accurate, because I can play bishop h6 or take on c5 first. It was not so clear what to play first, but the point is that if I take d takes, and now I play bishop h6, black has this extremely powerful exchange sacrifice, f6, take, take. And now computer gives some advantage for white, but I think that in practical game it's extremely difficult, because black will play c4, maybe the bishop will come to c5 for knight d6, knight b7. I should be careful about my pawn on a5, and I'm not sure what I'm doing on the king side. So you should be really careful, and I decided to play first bishop h6, and after knight g7, I took on c5. Look how important was this pawn structure, a5 before c3, to have this b takes c5 possibilities. Now, he took with the d pawn. He can take with the queen, but I was planning to play bishop e3, queen c7, c4, and after b takes, bishop b6. And it's very difficult to hold the position, because queen d7, bishop a4, then I will take the pawn on c4, and the position is almost winning for white. So my opponent took on c5, but then he realized that something went wrong, because I have this tactical trick. I'm using the same ideas like Fischer, some tactical possibilities when possible. And of course, after queen e5, bishop f4, and I'm taking on b8 with winning position. But he's still fighting. Okay, he has some control. He played f6, and I had to think where to d3 or to f3, and I understood that d3 is much better, because I can play f4 at some point, and if he plays c4, I have the possibility to play knight b4, and the knight is extremely well placed. But black played knight f7, and now maybe he didn't choose the best move. Maybe bishop e3 was a bit better to play after knight e5, take, and c4. But I thought that it was better to keep the knight on d3 instead of the bishop. Not so easy to understand what's better during the game. Played bishop f5, and he played bishop f4, and he played knight d5. Of course, after bishop d6, my idea was to take queen d6, and now I have this tricky move, queen e3, forcing to play c4 and knight b4. And I got a stable outpost for my knight, and I will play f4, rook d1, e5 in the right moment with crushing position. So he made knight d5, and as I showed you before, this move is quite important, just to avoid some c4 ideas in some moment. I think it's a very good idea. And he understood that the position is quite difficult for him, and he decided to play g5, trying to get some counterplay. But I took, and now I played bishop d1 to activate my bishop on g4. He tried to keep the bishop d7, bishop e4, bishop e8, and I decided, okay, just to close the f line, trying to exchange some pieces, just to keep it simple. Knight f5, bishop f5, and b takes c4. I have knight b2, rook b4, and now I'm quite sad that I didn't realize about some easy tactical possibility with bishop e6, king h8, knight c4, and after rook c4 I have d6 and I take the rook with winning position. Unfortunately, I didn't realize, and after rook c1 he played bishop b5, I played rook c3 with the idea rook c1, and my opponent was fighting really well, because he gave this change and played e4, and I'm almost winning here, but the position is complicated, some tactical possibilities, and I didn't find the best moves, anything could happen, but okay, I kept some control during the whole game, but things were not so clear. I had to be able to close the game here with bishop e6. So now we know how to play after knight c6, d5. what I believe that is the best possibility. Later, we should check another variations which can happen in the Chigorin middle game. Now it's time to have a look to another plan. In this position, white can play as well d7, d5, sorry. This is very similar to the previous position we have checked, but the knight is not going to d8, so there are some differences which I would like to show you. Normal move here is simply bishop d7, trying to develop. There are some players who used to play knight c4, a move I don't understand at all, actually, because the knight is not better placed on b3 than on a5. Somehow for me it's like losing some tempi. And here I like b3 the most. After a4, for example, bishop d7, b3, now the knight can come back to a5. And after knight b2, b takes f5, a4, b takes a4, the knight is very stable on a5, and the position is more or less balanced. So if I'm white, I will not play a4, I will play b3. I will push the knight. Okay, if now black plays knight a5, this would be really, really strange. Knight b6, a4, and bishop d7. And now black is forcing white to do something. A takes b5 is not the move, of course. Knight bd2 is a possibility, but of course g6, for example, and the game goes on. And what I like the most is a5. Actually, this is very similar to my previous game, which we checked before. And knight c8 only move. And now white has both possibilities, and we have a game of two fantastic players, Garry Kasparov and Alexander Grischuk, and we will learn a lot from these games. First, Gary, he decided to play like me, or I decided to play like him, as you wish. He played with b4, c4. Now black should do something immediately, because now the knight is not taking control of the c5 square. c4, and knight bd2, g6, knight f1, the moves they played, knight h5, bishop h6, developing, and rook e8. Now, if black would have the knight on the 8, it would be much easier to play f6, knight f7. But black played rook e8, queen d8 2, bishop f8, and here comes a very difficult mistake from Gary to understand. White had the possibility to play g4 here. It was an extremely powerful move. Why now is very powerful and before it was not? The answer is very simple. Now, if black plays knight g7, now there is no move f6, knight f7. So actually, the pieces are not well coordinated. The point too is that the knight cannot take control of the e5 square. So white can play knight h2, and after f4, knight f3, the position is extremely difficult for black, simply because only this small difference with the knight. Actually, why Kasparov didn't play g4? I guess that he had in his mind these games from rubbish time, and he decided that g4 was not the plan, and because of that, he simply played automatically, and he didn't realize about the difference between the knight on c8 and on d8. Because of course, Gary, he knew all the games, I'm sure about that. But he played knight g3, and now the position is better, but after taking f takes and knight e7, Ivanchuk played extremely solid with black, and it was not so easy to break the position. For example, rook f1 was the game, f6, rook f2, king h8, bishop e3, bishop g7, g4, rook f8, rook f1, rook e8. And what happened? Black simply tried to hold the position. h4 is not possible because g4 is hanging. g5 is not possible because of f5. And actually, the players agreed to a draw at some point. It's very difficult to find a plan. Probably the best thing Gary could try was to play some bishop h6, try to exchange the bishops, leave the queen on e3 with some queen b6 ideas in the future, but it's very hard for me to find a plan. Maybe something protecting the g4 pawn, playing h4, h5. But okay, actually, Gary didn't manage to break the position, so it was not so easy. But we should remember that here g4 is quite good because there is no possibility for black to take control of the e5 square. I want you to remember this. So, knight c8, now we'll have a look to Grischuk. He decided to play in a slightly different way. He played with c4, b4, and now starts knight b4, knight d2, bishop d8, knight f1, king h8. Normal moves. And now have a look to Grischuk move. Rook e2. Maybe it's not the best move, but I like it very much. The bishop is ready to go to b1, and the rook is ready in the future to go to the f line after f4. This is a maneuver that you should remember, because actually it's very nice. Queen b8, played black, bishop e3, knight e7, knight e3. Just normal devil moves. Queen c8, black has no easy plan actually, f5 is the only one, but look, he plays knight h4 and everything is under control. Only white can play for a win. Black decided to play knight g8, maybe he was just already trying to play some knight d8, g6, knight g7, but again we see that black has no control of the e5 square, and this will be a big problem. Grischuk improved his pieces with rook f1, knight d8 and knight f3. He's not in a rush, he goes slowly, bishop f6, now knight h2, with the df4 at some point, knight e7, and he goes knight h5, maybe he wants to take the bishop, we will see. Knight g6, trying to avoid f4, and he plays calm, bishop b1. He tries to improve all his pieces before. According to the computer, f4 was possible already, but in practical game it's not so easy. First you want to improve everything. Bishop b1, queen d8, and now he plays another move just to prepare for queen c1. King g8, it's clear that black doesn't know what he's doing because actually it's not easy to find a plan. But of course Grischuk was playing extremely well till this point. King h1, he doesn't want to give some bishop d4 possibility at some point. And Rapport decided to play bishop h4, he didn't know what to do already. Actually he's a very active player, I think it was really hard for him to wait in this kind of position. And now Grischuk decided it was the moment. f4, everything is in the right place, it's time to break. It takes, knight d5, and now I guess it was difficult for Grischuk to decide if knight d3 or knight f3 is good. The point is to remember the idea, trying to get control of the e5 square. And I wanted to have a look to this knight, how bad placed it is. This knight is doing absolutely nothing, it's only disturbing. But okay, Grischuk play knight d3, takes, and knight f6. He's trying to get the knight into the game, but it was already a bit late. Bishop f4, and now he decided to give the pawn, because for example, if queen e7, with the knight h5 first, simply knight f3 is coming, and the bishop is trapped on h4. So he had to give a pawn, knight h5, bishop d6, knight g3, bishop takes, knight f3. I don't know if white has some better possibilities. For example, this king g1 giving some exchange. Actually, it looks very, very interesting. I like it because after knight f1, we can take with almost every single piece. For example, with the queen, I like it. And even if bishop e7, we come back and then we will try to push f4, knight f3, rook f2. Very interesting idea. But of course, it's difficult to give an exchange when you have an easier option. But it's good to remember these kind of ideas. Petrosian will be really happy with this move. But he took on g3, bishop takes, knight f3, queen c7, rook e2, and now comes a very important moment. Now I was discussing with Ivan Sokolov about this position, and he was completely right that maybe it was the time for black to suffer, and it's time to play bishop e5, takes, and try to hold the position very solid. I said to him, okay, maybe I can play queen f4, but he was right. How I'm gonna win this endgame? f6, takes, and it's not so clear if white can win this position. Very good chances, but winning is another story. Maybe this was the best try for black, because black played f6, and now white made use of fantastic clearing sacrifice, e5. It gives the pawn, but every single line is open. Bishop e5 and queen c2. h7 is hanging, h6, bishop h7, king h8, and bishop f5. I like this, it's very technical and very clean, trying to exchange the bishops. Bishop e8, and he took on rook e1, then he took on e5, and white was completely winning. This was excellent game from Ruy, and he's showing how to play Spanish. So, actually, this idea with knight c4, I don't like it very much, of course, and we'll focus a bit into the main way to play the position, simply bishop d7 trying to develop, and now again, white has several possibilities. One is simply to develop, and now I want you to pay attention to g6. This move is very important. Like René Stern was playing in the previous game, the best square for the knight is h5, with the idea to go to g7 at some point, or to f4, and g6 is a very helpful move. For example, if knight f1, black would play knight h5, bishop h6 and rook b8. Nothing is happening on the queen side, the king side is under control, and the position is more or less balanced. So here, white played b3 at some point, and against knight h5 is a good possibility, but okay, black decided to play knight b7, a4, and now black made a mistake. He played rook b8 probably automatically, like in the other variation. But wait, because now we already have our rooks connected, and nothing is gonna happen to us. So it's simply better to place our knight on h5, knight on f1, and then the rook on b8. And maybe in the future we will try some ideas like queen c8, bishop d8, bishop b6, or something like that. Or maybe we'll try to play for f5, we'll try bishop f8, bishop g7, maybe give knight f4 the pawn when the bishop is on g7. But it has a very good game, because white didn't get this what it's supposed to get. But he played rook b8, and it's not so good because you are already giving the line without any need. But white played queen e2 and knight h5. Now white understood how to play, knight f1, and now I think black played a bit, okay, it's not bad, he played knight d8, trying to play like Rubinstein, but maybe b takes a4 and knight a5 was more with the position, trying to get an stable place for the knight, and some control on the c4, maybe we'll play c4, knight d3, and the position is completely imbalanced. I think black has good possibilities. But black decided to play knight d8, takes, and b4. And we are already in some kind of this position I played with Stern. But of course we already changed. And now black made, I would say, a huge strategical mistake. Because if you don't need to push c4, don't push it. Now we should think about the ideas we saw in the previous slide, and of course we will simply play f6, and after b takes, d takes, we play our ideas with knight f7, the knight will go to d6, and black has fantastic control with more or less balanced position. But black decided to close with c4, and it's not so bad, but look, now a7 will enter with all the pieces on the a line. It's like we open a highway for white to enter the position, and we should avoid it if possible. It's not dramatical, but you don't have to give it if it's not needed. So f6, now rook a7, rook b7, rook a1, trying to enter, knight f7, and here white decided to take on b7. I don't know if it's the best move, but okay. There is some pressure, take, queen c8, and white played queen d1, simply trying to get the line. Rook e8, queen a1, and white is better, simply. This was a rapid game between Anand and Brusson, and of course there were some mistakes in the game. From now on there were many mistakes, but probably they were with seconds already. But I want you to have a look to this position, to these moves, and how black could have improved his game, trying to play this g6 in the right moment, and so on. So this is about knight b2, but of course it's possible to play b3 first, and we are not showing. Maybe we want to play something on the queen side and then to develop the knight. We keep our possibilities flexible. And now it's very interesting that black, a very strong chess player like Ivanchuk, he made a strategical mistake like c4. Actually, it's quite big mistake because you are giving white a very easy game without any need. Simply, black should go for g6, knight h5. This is the plan in this kind of position. There is no other good plan, actually. We should try this, g6, and maybe rook a8, bishop f8, bishop g7, try to keep the position solid. And black is okay. I think the position is more or less balanced. But after c4, and now it's very interesting too that Topalov with white, he didn't go for b4, knight b7, a4. It's very typical. Then you will have the possibilities to play a5 at some point, or to keep the tension, and then you can play this a takes b5 and get the a line. This would be the easiest, actually, for white. But somehow Topalov, he decided to play something not so standard, and he played bishop a3 with some 95 ideas. But black played bishop d8, because, for example, if you play something like rook e8, takes d6, white is completely winning. Probably Topalov thought that bishop a3 was even better than before knight b7, but maybe a bit too tactical. Bishop d8, and he developed knight bd2. Of course, now he's not gonna play b4, because he already played bishop on a3. Knight bd2, and now knight e8 he played. But somehow he has a very interesting possibility that is not so common. He could take on b3, and I want you to look really carefully to this position. And after a takes b3, knight b7. And see, the queen goes to b8, the bishop goes to b6. Every single piece is playing. And actually black has very interesting position. The bishop on a3 is completely misplaced because it cannot create enough pressure on the d6 pawn. So this was very, very interesting idea for black. Another possibility was to play the typical g6 for knight h5. But he played this standard move that we all of us know already from Ruy style, and he played knight d8. A move that, if we have other possibilities, it's better to try something else. And now he played bishop b4, what is a bit strange again, but has some tactical ideas. I would have played bishop b2, and now the game could follow takes, knight b7, and very typical move, b4. We kill the knight. And then, moreover, at some point we have c4 possibility to open the queen side. For example, the possible line is queen c8, knight f1, bishop b6 to improve the bishop, queen e2, knight d8, knight d3, f6, and bishop d3. c4 will come in the right moment with much better position for white. But okay, white played bishop b4, and now again this possibility is a takes, and knight b7. And black was completely fine. The position had some ups and downs, then eventually Topalov won, but it's not so interesting anymore. The point is that we saw already some ideas, and after this knight c6 d5 variation and this d5 immediately, I think we know enough to play this kind of close position in the Chigorin. Now it's time to check another middle game position. Here, after queen c7, knight bd2, black can play c takes d4, c takes d4, and a completely new position arrives. Now black has several possibilities. The main line is to play knight c6, the one we will check much more deeply, but black can play with bishop b7. And look, here you should make automatically one move once you see this setup with the knight and the bishop on b7, and needs to play d5 to cut the bishop, and the knight cannot come back to c6. We will check now Shirov's game. He played, okay, black played rook c8, and Shirov played bishop b1, but it was possible to play bishop on d3. It was not a problem. Knight d7 and knight f1, As you see, we go with the knight to e3 or g3 to take control of the f5 square. If f5 is not possible, the bishop on b7 will have an extremely hard time. Black can play knight c5, and here we will play simply b3, taking control of all black pieces. And queen takes, bishop takes, will have very easy development, as I showed you, with bishop d2, knight, rook c1, knight g3. White is much better. If black tries to play f5, now it's possible to take on f5 or to play b3 simply. For example, if a takes f5, if bishop d5, we will have some ideas that we will check in the game. And if b3, maybe white was a bit worried about f4, because of that we didn't play with bishop d3. But we will play bishop d2, and the problem is that the queen set is extremely weak. We will play something like queen e2, rook c1, a4 at some point, and mate is very far. I don't believe at all. So white is much better. But okay, Shirov decided to play bishop b1, which is quite good as well. Knight d7 and knight f1. White is ready to play knight f3 and control the f5 square, and black decided to play f5. E takes f5, and now black play knight f6. According to the computer, knight c4 was a bit more accurate. Tried to get some attack on the d5 pawn, but after knight e3, knight f6, white has very strong move, a4. And look, the bishop will come in the right moment to a2, so taking on d5 is not so easy. For example, knight e3, bishop e3, knight d5, bishop a2 will come. In case of bishop d5, we'll have a takes b5, a takes b5, rook a7, getting the initiative, queen d8, and now several moves are possible, but probably the easiest is simply to play bishop a2, bishop takes, rook takes, and in the right moment the knight will jump g5, e6, with clear advantage for white. In case of knight d5, bishop a2 of course, and white is winning a piece. So, black play knight f6, and now very typical idea in this kind of position is to play knight g5, trying to jump on e6. Doesn't matter if you are giving the pawn on d5. The most important thing is to have the initiative. So, black took on d5, knight e3, queen b7, and now a move I like very much, b3. Just control. It's very difficult for black to get the move. Black played rook f8, and Shirov keep on developing with bishop d2, bishop d8, and bishop b6, bishop b4. Now d6 pawn is under attack, h6, and now a very nice pawn sacrifice, knight d6. Because if black takes, f takes, look, all my pieces will be playing, and almost no defense for black's king. So black decided to play bishop b6, and now Shirov made very strange mistake, because he could simply take a pawn with knight d5, queen d5, takes, bishop d6, and bishop e4 is coming, some winning position. Actually, it's very strange. He played queen d2 here, and he allowed take and knight c6, and the position was extremely complicated. At the end, white won, but this is not so interesting anymore. We saw this knight d5 idea, knight d6, and this is very important to fight against this bishop b7. So now we go for the main line. That is here, black's play knight c6. And now everything is about the tension. Everything is about who can keep the tension in the center, who can find more useful moves, not to show his cards. For example, now it's very important for white to play knight b3, defending d4. You might ask, why not d5? Why not to gain space? Now the situation changed dramatically compared to the previous lines, because after knight b4, bishop b1, before we had a pawn on c5. Now that square will be for the knight on b4. So very important move, a5. Look, the knight will go to a6 and to c5. All black pieces have good squares. Now we will check how Ivanchuk played with black. Very interesting game against Adams. White played knight f1 and he develops bishop d7, bishop d2, rook c8. He improves all his pieces. Of course, we leave the rook on the A line in case it's needed for something, and we make a space for our bishop. Bishop d8, bishop b6, typical maneuver. 93, 96. Again, trying these ideas, knight h2. And now black played knight c5. Maybe it's not the most accurate move, because actually I like very much queen a7 first, not to show my cards. I'm ready for bishop d2, bishop b6. The point is that after bishop a5, after knight c5, I attack the bishop and the pawn on e4. So after bishop b4, knight c4, black will be much better, because this central pawn was very important. But okay, he played knight c5, it's not a bad move. Queen f3, and now he went with queen d8. He decided to have the queen close to the king side, in case some attack will come. And actually this is fully understandable. Now, Adams played h4, but he could play, according to the computer, it was better to play knight f5, takes, and b4. And maybe the position is equal, but as I show you here, h6, knight h7, bishop g5 is quite a nice plan. As well, it's possible to play queen d7 somewhere with the idea bishop d8, bishop b6. Somehow it seems easier for black to play this position. So actually, maybe it's better, but in practical games it's still better for black the position. And after h4, we should understand. I mean, it's so difficult to understand, but we should have a look to this idea from Ivanchuk. First, he plays g6. So h5 is not possible. White played g4, trying to push the pawns a bit further with h5, and now extremely good move from Ivanchuk, and is h6. I call it Petrosian pawns because actually, if you remember, there is one very famous game in the Torah attack between Spassky and Petrosian. You can find it in the database. He places the pawns like this, and it's impossible to create an attack. What's the idea? Okay, if white plays h5, black plays knight h7, following bishop d5, and everything is under control. If white plays h5, black takes, and knight h5, following bishop d5 with winning position. So, what Ivanchuk got with both pawn moves is to take under control g4 and h4, and at some point these pawns will be under attack. So, please remember this setup with the pawns. I think it's very important. White played knight g2 in the game, understood that something was going wrong, and he played bishop f8. Queen f8 was interesting as well, but okay. We have a look to the game. g5, takes, and knight h5. Here Adams thought that with knight g4 he could make use of the weak squares, but actually they are not weak at all because all the pieces are taking control of the position. So he played bishop g7, and knight h6, takes, and queen f6, trying to exchange queens and make the position easier. Maybe I would like to play more something like queen e7 to keep the queens, then king h7, rook f8, and f5. This would be a sharpest try in this position. But okay, queen f6, queen e3, and now maybe he didn't play the best way because he played g5, going for some slightly better endgame, but it was much easier to play king h7. Right? But okay, g5 with the idea knight f4. So the only way is to enter the endgame. King h8, now rook g8 is coming, and he went wrong immediately. Adams with king h2, rook g8, and now he understood that he cannot make some normal moves like bishop e3 because it will come rook g4, then rook g8, and everything is falling. So white play f4, it takes, bishop a7, f3, and black won the game. Actually, it's a very nice game from Ivanchuk, and I like it very much how he handles with the pawns. First on the queen side, a5, knight a6, and then g6, h6. It's a good example how to play with black this kind of position. So we go for the tension. We keep the tension with white, and black does the same. Okay, a5 with the idea a4. And now what to do with white? Of course, white should keep the tension again, because after d5, knight b4, we will get similar position. Then black will play a4, knight x6, knight c5, with some kind of good king syndrome for black. So bishop e3 and a4. And now, where to go? to d2 or c1. Seems like d2 is the best way, because after knight c1, now bishop b7, d5, knight b4, bishop d1. We see now that the pieces are not very well coordinated and the c2 square is a bit weak. So rook c8 will come with the knight c2. We should play a bit of a strange move, rook e2, and now knight a6. And again, the same ideas. You see, queen d7, bishop d8, knight c5, bishop b6, with good position. The knight on c1 is completely misplaced. Moreover, knight d3 is very difficult because e4 is hanging. So knight d2 is the normal move here, and now there are several possibilities, and the position, I must say, that is extremely interesting. Probably white is slightly better in this kind of position, but there are many interesting strategical ideas that we should know. So, one opportunity for black is to play knight b4, just to make white lose some coordination. Bishop b1, bishop d7, just to double. Okay, a3 is necessary move, because the knight on b4 is annoying us. a3 and knight c6. And now, very important position, because white has two options. White can develop the bishop to a2, attacking the king side, or the bishop to d3, attacking the queen side. It's very tempting to play bishop a2 and attack the king side, but incredibly is wrong. That plan is wrong, and I think black can even get better position. So it's important to play with the bishop on d3. Our advantage will be on the queen side. We will understand why later. First, let's check why bishop a2 is not that good. Here, black will play queen b8. We will follow now one game from Beliavsky. He's an extremely good player in this kind of position. Now, he doesn't want to be on the c line, of course. Rook c1, and he plays very interesting move. He plays h6. He doesn't want to be worried about knight h5 at all. So I think it's very intelligent. White keeps the tension, queen e2, and now rook e8. He puts the rook into the same line than the queens. And now it's difficult for white to find a move, because what to do? To play d5, take on e5, there are many possibilities and it's not so easy. For example, if white plays d5, black will play knight a5, and then he will follow the easy plan, bishop d8, bishop b6, or even b4 at some point, with even better position. When the black square bishops are exchanged, then we'll go to b6, b7, c5. Another possibility is to keep the tension with knight f1, but black is ready to play b4, following rook d1, b3, and already these pawns are a bit annoying, and if we get some kind of endgame, the situation can be really difficult for white. So in the game, here, Chiburtanidze decided to play d takes e5, and it's very typical move. White, black took, and bishop c5, trying to exchange these bishops and get some control on the c line. Now you can see if the bishop would be on d3 for white, there would be some bishop b5 possibilities. But okay, here black played b4, already getting some contact play, bishop b7, and black took with the rook. Probably it's better to take with the knight, because then after knight g6, we'll have very good squares, b3 is coming, and I start to like black's position already, although the computer says that it's still equal. But okay, never mind, he took with the rook, and already the computer gives queen e3, but it's really hard to leave black play b3. So white decided that okay, better to play bishop d5, and like this the bishop will not be stacked. But after takes knight a5, white played queen e3, and Beliavsky found very nice idea with knight b3, knight takes b3, and b takes a3, giving a piece. But the point is that after knight b2, 8 takes b2, rook c3, bishop f5, we want to play b1 at some point, knight b1, queen d6, knight d2, queen d5. Black is much better because at some point he will get the piece back, and already 3 pawns. So actually this is a very good example why white should not play with bishop a2, because there is no pressure on the queen side, and these before ideas are quite annoying. So we should have a look to bishop d3. Bishop d3 and black defense with queen b7. Queen b8 is possible, but somehow most of the players have played the queen here. Actually, I cannot say why queen b8 is worse, but maybe I think that some rook b8 ideas with the idea of b4 make sense now. So maybe this is one of the reasons. So queen b7, queen e2 attacking, and now black still plays rook e8. It's not in a rush to play something on b8, because after bishop b5, we have the trick knight d4. Knight d4, e takes d4, bishop d7, d takes e3. Some tactics. D takes, e takes, and okay, 2 pieces for a rook, but black has this knight d4 idea, then playing d5 or knight f6, white doesn't have enough compensation. So white should keep on developing pieces, and white played rook c1 here. And now there are many possibilities. In this game, black decided to play rook b8. And now we get some very typical situation in this kind of pawn structure, that suddenly it's not so easy to find a move anymore. And what to do with white? Because if we try to keep the tension, black will take on d4, knight takes, and bishop f8. And look, the pressure on the A line, and I think white should be already think about equalize. So once you cannot find a useful move, it's very important to decide d5 or d takes e5. d5, as we saw in some previous lines, I don't like it very much because of knight a5 and this bishop d8, bishop b6 ideas, as well before it's coming, and I don't see where I'm going with white. So white should take, and now black has 2 possibilities. After knight e5, white will take, knight f3, attacking the a5 pawn, bishop d6, and bishop c5. And this is very typical game in this position. The queen will come to e3, rooks double on the c line, and white has some small pressure, but very annoying. This is what white should look for. So black decided to take on e5, and now it's very interesting. We are following one game between Karpov and Hort. And here, Karpov failed to find the best move. Actually, white should make again this plan. Bishop c5, knight h5, and g3. Do you remember Fischer games? Again, the same idea. Bishop h3, takes, and knight g5. This is already familiar to us. So after bishop c5, white will be slightly better, as in previous line with the queen on e3, trying to double pieces on the c line, and this will be much better. Here Karpov played knight b1, and actually he already allowed b4, bishop d8, and the position was really strange. For example, the game followed bishop d8, rook c5, b4, rook b5, but okay, this is already not what we should check because the position is a bit dirty and difficult to understand. But remember, bishop c5 and the idea for the c line. This is how white should play. And everything is about tension, how to keep the tension. This was about knight b4, and now we should check what happens if black doesn't play with knight b4 and plays simply bishop d7. Now rook c1 and queen b7. Again, we have the same position, the tension. We should find useful moves. And now we can play with knight f1. This is very important. Of course, d5 as usual. Now we have knight b4 or even knight a5, but again, this kind of position which I like. Here, queen e2 is another possibility, trying to put the pressure on b5, but now there is one extremely nice game, at least correct, between Kramnik and Adams. Adams played rook e8, bishop d3, and rook b8. Position is not the same. Now the pawns are not on a3, and now it's not so easy to find move for white. Kramnik played in typical way, take, knight takes, d takes, bishop e5, everything like in the book, but Adams managed to hold this position without many problems. First bishop c6, takes, rook takes, knight f3, attacking the e5 pawn in the future, h6, getting some control, rook c7, and knight e7, controlling the c5 square, rook c3, rook e6. Maybe black had the possibility to play knight f8 with knight e6 or knight g6 ideas, but he wanted to play safe. Adams, rook e6, rook c1, rook d8, improving all the pieces, queen c2, and knight f6. The bishop on d3 is hanging, so it's not necessary to defend it. And here Kranny decided to go for knight e5, takes, and they eventually made a draw in 2005. So here we have an example how black with good play can hold the position. But of course knight f1 is better for white. And again h6, this is the same move that we saw in previous games. Maybe here makes sense for black to make something else, because knight g5 is not that dangerous. I don't know, maybe some move like rook c8, or don't know, or some rook e8 simply, would be good just to keep the tension. But of course, white has another easy move with knight g3, and after this, black should think what to do. So it's not so easy. But black plays a6, as I said, knight g3 and rook e8, and white plays queen d2. Actually, Ivanchuk is playing this with white. It's very interesting. When I was trying to find some very interesting games, I could find good games from Ivanchuk with white and with black. And I decided to include many of his games here because I think they are really instructive. Here, for example, black decided already, okay, it's time to take on d4. I cannot hold anymore. But actually, black still could make some extra move like bishop f8. And now white should think, shall I play d5? Shall I take on in e5? Shall I play rook d1? It's not so easy. You see how the game is going. But he took on d4. Spindler with black, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, exactly. This was in 2008. It was a rapid, by the way. And now Ivanchuk got a bit excited and he decided to take on h6 and try some mating ideas. But actually after knight d4, the position is completely fine for white. Everything is protected, some control in the center, knight f5 is coming. I think white is much better here. I don't know why he didn't play like this. Probably he thought that he was winning after bishop h6 and he blundered next move from black. Maybe he only thought about g takes h6 and something like queen h6, then following knight g5 and some mate. But Spindler, extremely good defender by the way, he played knight d5, bishop g5, and knight f3, g takes, bishop h3, and the position is very strange. And white had a very nice idea here, because he took on d4 and the position was not clear. But he could play king h2, bishop e6, and king g2 following. And look, he will double on the h line, and probably black will be mated. It's a very nice idea. Computer doesn't see it at the beginning, but once you show him, he starts to understand that things are not so easy. But in the game it was queen d4, knight h7, take, f4, queen h4, and black was better, but eventually it was a draw. So if you have to remember something about this c takes d4, c takes d4 position, is tension. We should keep this tension as much as we can, and when we cannot do it, we should decide what to do with both colors, with black and with white. Now it's time to have a look to some tricky moves. Here, after knight bd2, we saw already knight c6, c takes d4. But there is other way of playing. In the last 2 years, some of the best chess players in the world decided that there are some interesting waiting moves to be played. For example, here, the world champion Magnus Carlsen decided to play bishop d7. Simply waiting. Okay, what do you want to play? I'm not sure. Only Grandelius and Carlsen are the best players with black, and they have been working together, so probably they had some ideas here. After bishop d7, of course, it's possible to play d5, but it will be similar to this d5 position we saw, where I had to play with g6, knight h5. And the normal move is simply to play knight f1 with the knight e3 afterwards. Here they decided to play with knight c4, but is very normal move. And now b3, knight b6, and knight e3. Everything is very normal. Both sides are trying to keep the tension. And now it seems like black has no easy move, because for example, imagine that black plays rook e8 waiting. Now something really good for white will come, that d takes e5, d takes e5, and c4, and then the knight is jumping to d5 with advantage. For white, this is a very typical idea, and black should avoid it. Because of that, after knight e3, black is playing c4, trying to get control of the position. And here there are several moves, but probably the most concrete move is bishop a3 with d takes e5 ideas, rook e8, queen d2, and bishop f8. Everything is very normal, and once again we see this very typical thing about Chigorin. Both sides are trying to keep the tension and not showing his cards. And now, in one game between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen, Wesley decided to take on c4, and I think it was too fast. And after knight takes, b takes, rook a b1, rook a b8, somehow Carlsen managed to hold this position without much problem. So, once again, I like to keep the tension with rook a d1, and now black plays c takes b3. Maybe it's possible simply to play h6, this kind of waiting move that we already saw in many variations. You never know when knight g5 will be a move. But okay, he decided to take, a takes, and a5, but it's very normal, because a4 is coming at some point, and black wants to create some pass pawn. And here there were several games. Grandelius got twice this position, and I think it's a very interesting position. Once he made draw almost immediately with Ba4 probably he was not so comfortable, and he just took on e5, took on f8, and played queen d6, take, and after knight c8, rook d1, knight b6, he decided that the best was to repeat and make a draw. He was not so familiar with the position, probably Grandelius played very fast, and decided that it was not so easy to break the position. But here, Areschenko, some time later, he decided to play rook c1 to keep some more tension. And now it's interesting that Grandelius made a huge mistake, in my opinion. He played a4, and now after b takes a4, knight takes a4, because after b takes a4, this pawn is passed, but you cannot push it forward. And after bishop d3, at some point white will play d5, c4, with better position. So in the game he played knight a4, and now it's very nice how Areschenko played. Bishop b4, he holds, rook a c8, and bishop b1. Maybe bishop b3 was good as well, but okay, this is good enough. Simply, you see, with this bishop on b4, white is keeping his position together, and it's much better. So, knight b6, bishop d3, keeps on developing, and now maybe black made the final mistake. It was necessary to play knight c4, knight takes, b takes, and bishop c2. And white is slightly better, but actually it's very similar to Carlsen's game with Wesley So. The only difference is that we don't have the a pawns, and maybe this makes it a bit easier for white to increase the pressure in the center. But it's nothing terrible. But after bishop d3, black decided to play queen b7, and now Areschenko played extremely precise. He took on e5, d takes, bishop f8, only way to take with the king, and now c4. Probably the move that Grandelius blundered, because now he cannot take on c4 because of queen b4, king g8, and knight c4, with the pin on the b line, with advantage. So he had to play king g8, and after c takes b, take on e4, bishop takes, queen takes, some tactics come, knight c4, knight takes, queen d7, queen a8, knight g5, attacking on f7, rook f8 only move, queen d3, attacking on h7, and c4, e4 only move, knight e4, and with pawn up, the position is almost winning because the b5 pawn is very strong. So, what should be played? Here, instead of a4, it was very important to take on d4, because if c takes d4, black plays queen d8 simply, and it's threatening knight takes c4, and it's very hard for white to defend. And if queen d4, now a4. This was the right move for them. The d6 pawn is not so weak, and we have some pressure on e4. And after bishop b4, bishop e6, takes, the position is more or less equal. Black will play something like knight e7, knight c5, and it's more or less equal, nothing special. So actually this bishop d7, it's very interesting way of playing. There are not so many games yet, and we need more practical examples. But what I like is the strategical idea about bishop d7, simply keeping the tension. So, here, rook e8 is the other move I want to check. This, we can call it Rapport's move. Actually, he played one fantastic game against Ganguly here. And the idea is the same, bishop d7, but keeping the tension in some different way. He wants to play some bishop f8, g6. It's a bit different, but the same idea. Here, Ganguly decided to play b3, but seems very logical to play bishop b2. We should have a look to other moves. For example, if knight f1, black will play g6, knight g3, and bishop f8. Once again, keeping the tension, and white should see. By the way, maybe in this position could be interesting to try Fischer idea with d takes, and knight t3, or maybe knight h2 with the idea queen f3, knight g4, knight t3. This is another possibility. We should always think about every kind of pawn structure. It's not a coincidence that we check all the pawn structure, and now we are checking this keeping the tension. If we don't know the previous examples, there is no way we can understand this. But knight d3 is normal move, and bishop f8, and for example d5. This is a common way of playing. And here, for example, there are several moves, bishop d7 with a complicated game, or it's possible to improve the knight a bit, knight c4 with knight b6, and the position is more or less balanced. It's really complicated. And for example, d5, what you should avoid is to play c4. This move you should avoid. It's a strategical mistake, as we saw before, because of b4, takes, and after knight b7, we play bishop d2 with this b4, c4 idea. We saw an example before. So this is what can happen. If we take immediately d takes knight f1, now can bishop e6, bishop e3, rook d8, queen e2, and something like h6, and it's very similar to Fischer variation. Another possibility is to close immediately with d5, and here we will play or bishop d7 or our favorite g6. But the position will follow bishop d7, d3, g6, and we will play like in all this idea we checked in previous games. So b3 is something a bit different, and now Rapport play g6, bishop b2, and bishop f8. He's keeping the tension. Actually, I was very lucky because when I checked this game, I was next to Rapport. Actually, we were playing in the same team. So actually, I was very impressed with what happened. Because now, okay, white should find a move, and it's not so easy. Because you know that all black moves are very easy to play, and you should make the decision. D takes c5, d5, keep the tension. So because of that, it's so important to know all the plans with white, to know what's the best plan. Actually, I think here Ganguly failed, because he played a3, and I don't like this move at all. It's like you are losing some harmony on the queen side. It was much better or to play knight f1 with the idea knight d3, or to play simply d5 with the idea to play c4 and close the center, and then we can play like Grischuk play, for example. There are many possibilities. Simply we should think about a plan and stick to it. But here, Ganguly decided to play a3, and now the game becomes extremely tactical. Rapport decides to play c4. This I like very much because now the bishop b3 bishop b2 doesn't make sense at all. Now I already think that black is better, at least from the practical point of view. b4, and now Rapper is making use of the tactical possibilities in the position, and he takes on d4. I like it very much. If knight c6 was possible as well, but of course the game will follow a4, bishop d7, d5, knight e7, knight f1, and okay, some normal position. But as very typical Rapper, he likes to change the nature of the position and hopes that the opponent will get lost there. It takes d4, and this is very good, because for example, if b takes a5, d3, bishop d3 maybe is the best thing to do, but after bishop b1, bishop b7, and it's very funny because black only has one pawn for the piece, but look, this bishop, this rook, everything is out of the game. Black then will take on d4 with almost winning position, even if he's a piece down. Very nice sacrifice. Another possibility is c takes d4. Probably it was better, but I guess that Ganguly, he was worried about c3, bishop takes, queen takes, b takes a5, and bishop b7. Black will take at some point on a5, bishop h6, and black has the pair of bishops, some pressure on the center. Computer says that the position is equal, but looks easier for black from the practical point of view. So after e takes d4, game fall knight d4, and now simply knight c6 coming back. The bishop is still very bad place and difficult for white to find moves. Knight to f3, and now maybe Rapper makes some inaccuracy. It was better simply to play bishop e7 and keep the tension, but he decided to take on d4. And now it's funny that again Ganguly doesn't take with the bishop to activate. Here for me is extremely strange, because you need this move. You need to make some space for your bishop. And okay, after c3, bishop c1, at least your bishops are playing somewhere. I don't know, the bishop can come to 4 to g5. It's very strange that he decided to take with the knight. And now Rapport didn't lose time, and he decides to open the position now that the pieces are not playing. It takes d5 and bishop d7. Fantastic position for black. a4, and now it was possible to play something kind of like queen d7 and try to get some slightly better position, but Rapport decides to go for some dynamics. Maybe it was better to start with rook e1, but okay, the most important is the idea. He took on d5, a takes b5, and knight f4. Probably it was not the best objectively, but in the practical game it worked perfectly. White took, bishop g2, and now the position looks extremely dangerous for white, and seems like the only way for white to hold was to play something like rook e3, that is very strange, with the idea rook g3. But maybe it's the only way. Here, white immediately collapsed. He played f3, and he completely blundered knight d3. And actually he resigned here when he understood that after rook e8, queen g3 comes and he gets mated. So this was the game. I think we should pay a lot of attention to these tricky moves, waiting moves, and we should have these ideas all the time when we are playing with black. And with white, we should know exactly what to do in order not to get lost, like what happened to Ganguly in this game. Now it's time to study the last kind of position. This Benoni time I said to you at the beginning that appears after knight d7, knight bd2, e takes d4, c takes d4, knight c6, d5, knight d5. Here we start. This is completely different to everything we checked in this video. Black doesn't care about the a5 pawn, how to hold it, how to make some strange moves like rook e8, bishop d7, h6. This is not important at all. We just go for Benoni structure and let's start. This position, I should say, is extremely interesting. I don't know if white is objectively better. I've found many games and I will try to give you some ideas about this kind of position. Of course, this is not about theory. I will show you the middle game ideas and hopefully you can find your way. if you get this kind of position. Here a4 is considered to be the best move to implement to force rook b8. White has a very interesting possibility, the one I like the most in this kind of position, although there are not so many games, and is to play knight h2. I like this approach. I consider that in this position, black doesn't have enough space for both knights, so we shouldn't exchange pieces. Anyway, maybe I'm the only one who's thinking like this, and there are not so many games. And I will show you just one interesting example for one of my colleagues in the Spanish team, Manuel Perez Candelario, where he was outplaying Elianov. So black decided to play knight g6, very logical move, to play f4, and now white played a4 to take on b5, rook b8, and now the easy move g3 to play f4. I really like how Manolito, as we call him, played in this position, because black plays c4, okay, now he's ready to have a square on c5, but he doesn't give it because he takes on b5, a takes, and b4. I like this move very much from the positional point of view, even if the computer is not so sure, because now look, the rook has some squares, and white simply wants to push the pawns f4, h4. In the game, black got lost extremely quickly, because black played bishop f6, rook a3, and now it's not so easy to find the move, because white is pushing the pawn simply h4, f4, h5, and everything is under control. And according to the computer, knight b6 is the best, with the idea after h4, some rook e8, and hope to play knight d5, knight d3 at some point, give a pawn, and very complicated position. But I don't know who is better, computer says 0, 0, 0, but simply it's very interesting way. He got lost easily, he played bishop d4, knight f3, bishop b6, he tried to improve the position of his pieces, and actually according to the computer it was very easy for white to play knight d4, with the idea to play some king g2, bishop e3, f4, with much better position. Anyway, Manolito, he played here bishop g5, queen c7, and h4. He decided to play something different, knight d5, and now he played bishop e3. What I like is that even if he didn't find the best moves, then he got very nice position, because knight f3, knight takes, he took with the rook, knight e5, and queen d4. And this pawn on b4 is so unpleasant for black. I like very much this position. Elianov decided to make some exchanges and get into some endgame. Actually, he managed to hold, but he was very, very close to lose. Just imagine, at some point you will go with the rook to a3, then maybe f4, the king will go to d4. It's very, very difficult. It's a pity that he could not win this game. But knight h2 is something to be remembered here, this kind of ideas. Another possibility is knight e5, the one I don't like very much, because knight e5, f4, now it becomes very concrete. Knight g6, knight f3, and black has the important move bishop h4. f5 is another possibility in this kind of position. The point is that after e5, bishop b7, e6, we should not be worried about this kind of pawns, because at some point we will attack them. For example, here, computer move is rook a7, with the idea to play queen a8, maybe bishop d8, and knight d7, and attack the d5 pawn. So this is some kind of typical middle game, which can appear. So after knight f3, bishop h4 takes, because rook f1 was an idea from Ba4, but after bishop g3, f5, knight e5, black was completely fine. So knight h4 takes, and now white should play f5, because if rook f1, at least bishop h3, at least black will make a draw, and even black has the possibility to play f5 with a more complicated position. So f5, knight e5, rook f1, and bishop d7. I like very much this game because black played very simple. Bishop f4, queen e7 back, queen e1, and f6. Everything under control, super knight on e5, queen g3, rook e8, b3, a5. Now, black starts to play slowly. With black is Ponomarev, and actually, I don't know if you know him, but I trained with him, I know what is to play against him, and when he gets this kind of position, he starts rolling till he just crosses over you. Bishop d1, Queen d8, Bishop h5, Rook e7, King h2, Bishop e8, trying to exchange the bishop. He exchanged, and he has this pressure on the line, Rook e1, a4, and eventually he won, thanks to this pressure on the pawn. Very nice game from Ponomarev, and very clean, like he normally likes this kind of games. So here we should have a look to the main line. The difference is that after a4, normally black plays or rook b8 or b7, or bishop b7. You should always forget, you will never see this move, because knight e5 takes f4, knight g6, and knight c4. And white's position is much better. Black should never play b4. And first let's check rook b8, because I think bishop b7 is the best move. Rook b8, now there are several possibilities. The one I like the most, as I showed you before, is this 8 takes and knight h2 idea. I like this idea very much because I find it difficult for black to choose moves. In this game, Adams with black, he played bishop d5. It was a rapid game, a blitz game actually, but it's interesting. And g3. And now it's difficult because bishop f6, f4 is coming, the pawns are rolling, and he decided to give the bishop, what is big mistake actually, because bishop d2, knight f6. Now Motilev, he played extremely well. He just went for him. He just played g4, h5, f4, knight c4, bishop c1 first, takes, b4, and g5. And simply, white is completely winning. Some queen d3, e5. Very difficult. So imagine, if Adams didn't manage to find the place for his pieces, actually this plan deserves much more attention. But normally white plays 95, takes, and goes for some tactical possibilities with f4, knight g6, knight f3, bishop h4. And now there are some differences with the previous variation. After rook f1, bishop g3, f5, knight e5, there are some interesting possibilities with knight g5, some mating ideas. Here, Svildler played bishop h4 and is completely losing after f6, h6, queen h5. He lost to Narkev one game. You should remember not to play like this. But they're Madlakov. Actually, both they are training together nowadays. Svildler and Madlakov. He played h6, f6, g takes f6. The position is more or less equal, and actually Madlakov won in the European previous year. So now it's time to get into this bishop b7, the one I like the most. And in this position, we will follow David Anton games. He is my friend from Spain, a very interesting chess player who likes very complicated positions. And these games are very important because he will show you a new way to play in the Spanish. And actually he almost became the winner in the strong open in Gibraltar. He managed to beat with black, Topalov and Sutovsky. And we will have a look to this game. First, with Topalov. He played queen e2, and he just played calmly rook b8, just to avoid something on b5. And white decided to take. Once again, I think the plans with knight h2 are better. But it's my opinion. No one believes me yet, so we will see if some players decide to play like this. Knight e5, knight takes, he took on b5. And now he decided not to play on with f4 because he could create some weakness, and he decided to play calm first. And he played knight f1. And now David, he played extremely calm. Rook e8, knight e3, and bishop f6. He's placing the pieces in the best squares, bishop d2, and now a move that should be very easy for all of us to play. simply bishop c8. Now the bishop is doing nothing on b7. Okay, I come back to c8. I'm not worried. Here, computer says the position is equal, but actually is winning the player who can find more useful moves, and this is not an easy thing. Topalov played bishop a5, queen e7, bishop c3, and now here we see the difference, knight g6. David, he's always using some strategical ideas with every single move, just try to get some imbalance. And actually here Topalov loses. He loses the game. How to explain it? Simply he loses and you cannot see where is the mistake. And this is extremely strange that it happens between some ex-world champion and one, okay, strong player, but not that level yet. Because after knight g6, exchanging the black square bishops make black's life much easier, and white's different, and white's life very complicated. We'll understand now why. Queen f3, take, and queen g5. And now it's very interesting. White cannot attack a thing. Maybe the position is equal, but there is no even a single plan for white. And I can imagine how difficult it was for Topalov to play this position. And nothing can be attacked, only can wait. He played king h2, and now David improved his position slightly. He played h5. Topalov played rook a7, trying to attack something, and David, okay, rook e7, I don't care, we'll exchange one pair of rooks. Takes, knight takes, and rook a1, he's trying to get the line. Everything very logical, but knight g6, and queen g3, trying to exchange queens. Actually, it's so difficult, and David says, no, now I attack your pawn c3. And it's incredible how white position is lost here, almost. And it's not so clear what he did wrong. Because of that, I think that it's very important not to exchange the knights, because then black's position becomes very easy to play. Actually, Topalov played very strange move, knight f5. I think he considered the position was very bad already. Take, knight e5 in the center, rook b1, h4, queen f4, and g5. I like it very much, because now the knight on e5 is stable for the whole game. Queen e3, knight c4, queen c1, and king g7. Very nice, very calm, just improving the position move by move. White played bishop e3, and now he's playing knight d5. And of course, if white plays on b5, black will take on f5, and still the pin on the b line, and the position is winning for black. Topalov played bishop e4, but now David decided to play g4 and go for mate. Takes, king g1, and now again he changed what he's doing and he plays queen h6, takes, and now king f1, king g5, and Topalov, he decided to resign because he cannot attack a thing. He will play knight f6, b4. Black is completely winning. Very, very nice game from David. I was very impressed when I saw this game. And queen e2 maybe is not the best way. Knight e5, this was the other game. f4, knight g6, knight f3. This is Sotovsky against Anton, and another game, Shirov with Howell. David here, he decided to play with bishop f6, but we can have a look to rook e8, another system. And here, Shirov played with a takes b5. Maybe it's possible to play f5 directly. Maybe this is more interesting, because now knight e5 is not possible. Maybe this is the reason why David played bishop f6 first. I would say. But in the game, it was a takes, rook a8, queen a8, and b3, trying to hold the position, bishop d8, and Shirov decided to play f5 here. What is interesting, although maybe it's not advantage for white. Knight f8, bishop f4, queen a6, bishop d3, and now simply black made a big mistake here, because decided to push c4, and it was not the time yet. Black could play bishop a5 and try to follow the next plan. Knight d7, bishop c3, try to remove the queen somewhere, and some b4, and get control of the e5 square with some very interesting game. But he decided to play c4, and after takes, bishop c2, bishop f6, he played queen d2, c3, queen d3. The c3 pawn was weak at some point, as well as the d6 pawn. Shirov was better against David Howell. So maybe there are some things that should be improved in this game. But I would like to focus in David's game again, because I think it's brilliant, simply, how easily managed to play a strong opponent like Sutovsky. He played bishop f6 first, white played g3, and again, very calm. Queen d7, king g2, rook e8, rook a3, everything very logical. And now David plays a very interesting, quite mysterious move, and it's bishop d8. But actually I think it's very annoying in practical game, because you never know when f5 is coming for black. And actually it's not easy at all to find a plan for white. And I guess that here Sutovsky was thinking how to break the position, is not possible, what move to make, and it's not so easy to find the moves. And he decided, okay, let's push h4 and try to get some space. But David doesn't care, and okay, he goes to f8, he keeps the position very stable, and now white should think again what to do. And even although computer gives some advantage here, for white it's not so easy in practical game. Probably white should go now for this idea in Manolito's game with 8 takes, rook takes, bishop takes, and b4, trying to destroy, and after c4 play this kind of position where maybe white is slightly better. But this was very important, because white decided to go for some attack on the king side, and we will see how easily David refutes it after h5. He plays h6, he doesn't want to allow it, and here f5 in my opinion is big strategical mistake, but okay, if you know Sutovsky, he wants to attack all the time, and it's very normal move from him. David played bishop f6 calmly, and he goes for knight h2. It's clear knight g4, some attacking ideas, but we will see this will never happen in this game. David played knight h7, knight g4, and bishop d4. Everything is under control. Now here they exchange everything, 8 takes, and b4. Maybe it was smarter to make it earlier. Huh? Now it's not so good, and David simply improves all his pieces. Rook a2, b takes, d takes, bishop e3. Maybe the position doesn't look so clear, but computer says that black is winning because so many weaknesses on white's position. Takes, and knight f6, improving the knight. e5 is never possible because d5 is hanging, and white decided to play king h3, and David of course stops the pawn forever, and everything is playing. Very nice position. Here Sutovsky decided to just give the pawn to get some compensation, some pass pawn. Although now look, this bishop becomes a monster here, so maybe it was not the smartest choice. And actually David plays very good because he finds a very good tactical resource. He just takes on c2, and now of course if queen c2 he will simply play knight e4. He's taking on d6 and d3. The position is winning. So white here in this position decided to play something different with d7, and after knight d7, okay, we cannot blame David that he didn't see knight d4, d8, king h7, and this position is winning anyway. Okay, it's not normal when you have a better position. But he took on d7, take on c2, queen f5, g4, queen d5, take, and he eventually won the endgame. So this was all. We have checked many middle game ideas in the Chigorin. I think you are ready to face the middle game confident. You will not get lost there. And once you have some more knowledge about the opening, you will be ready to fight anyone.